Hello there, people of the internet. Whether we like it or not, video game culture and gun culture are pretty gosh darn intertwined. And that upsets people, and I don't know why that upsets people. Typically, the people that are upset by that are like the elderly crowd who don't necessarily like or know video games all that much. Because I've noticed that a lot of us younger crowd, like I myself am 28 years old and I have no problems with it whatsoever, but us younger crowds tend to have a lot less issue with video game culture and gun culture being very intermixed. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the idea of gun culture in video games, and then we'll talk about video game culture in guns. Gun culture in video games, sometimes you get yourself some, I'm gonna go and adjust my camera here. You guys are not where you're supposed to be, right there. Gun culture in video games sometimes works out extraordinarily well, and you get video games that are really focused on making sure that the firearms aspect are really well done. Like, there's some video games out there that have done guns extraordinarily well. One thing that really comes to mind is like the early Call of Duties. They had just their firearms top tier in those early games. And one thing that comes to mind is the later Call of Duties, like Call of Duty Vanguard, where they clearly don't give a damn about the historical accuracies or actual like fundamental mechanics of how firearms actually work. And we can't do much about that right there. But what we can do, because we are the gun culture, we can choose how we act towards the video game culture that wants to get involved in the gun culture. I have seen some pretty disgusting situations where, like, somebody who doesn't like video game culture will just harp on somebody who wants to get into firearms simply because of video games. Like, somebody played, I don't know, Battlefield 1 or Battlefield 4, or in my particular case, it was the early Call of Duties that got me into guns, like that, and watching various movies and whatnot. Just the situations of people wanting to figure out how to get firearms in real life based off of whatever video game it is that they play. There's people out there that don't like that, and I don't really understand that. Like, for example, say somebody plays, I don't know, some of the Call of Duty games, like Call of Duty World War II or something like that, and it's a newer Call of Duty game. They're probably going to be a younger person, although I've played it. I'm sure many of you guys have as well. And then they're like, oh, I really like that bolt-action Mauser rifle. I'm going to go out and get myself one of those. So they go out, they try to find one, they get themselves one, they take it to the gun range, and then the old, what are they called? The old range safety officer is like, alright, this kid's got himself an old school gun. Let's talk to him about it. Hey, boy, do you know what that thing is? And he's like, yeah, it's a Car 98, although it's actually a Yugoslavian Mauser. It's a Car 98, and I got to play with it on Call of Duty, or I got to play with it on Battlefield, or I got to play with it on whatever the hell. And then that guy will just like tear into the kid and just completely knock him out of wanting to be involved in the gun community at all, which is the exact opposite of what we want. Many of us are here because of video games, and whether we like it or not, we are here because of video games, and many people just do not like that. However, the people that are here wanting to get involved in the gun culture because of video games, they're on our side, guys. Stop treating the gun community like it's supposed to be divided. We are not here to fight each other. I don't care if you prefer bolt-action rifles. I don't care if you prefer muskets. I don't care if you prefer battle rifles over something like an AR. I don't care if you want the AK over something like the AR. Personally, I would take the AK over the AR myself if we were talking about something long-term, but in most of the situations, I'm reaching for my AR because I personally believe it's the better platform that is significantly more customizable. It's just not as durable as the AK in terms of longevity, but that's a story for another time. Bottom line, I don't care what you pick. We are all in this together. We are in the gun community together. Just because your go-to is bolt-action rifles doesn't mean that you have to go hate on somebody who set up his AR-15 to look like it's something out of futuristic Call of Duty, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I haven't played any of the new Modern Warfares. Don't give me any spoilers. Personally, I think the older ones are probably going to be better, though. But just because you like something doesn't mean that you have to hate somebody who likes something else. That's one of the big contingency points that I'm trying to make here. Just because you like old guns, because you prefer, I don't know, gun culture from the 1960s, doesn't mean that you have to hate on somebody who also likes old guns, who also enjoys the Mauser platform, or who also wants to go out and get themselves a Mosin Nagant simply because they played, I don't know, Call of Duty World at War back in 2015 or something like that. I don't know, when did that game come out? But just because you don't like the aspects of somebody and what they enjoy or why it is that they got into a hobby doesn't mean that you have to be their enemy. I never understood why people hated so dearly the idea of somebody getting into guns because of video games. I get the feeling that most of my commenters are going to be like, yeah, if you want to get into guns, I don't give a damn where you come from. Let me show you about all the guns. I mean, that's how I'm like. The amount of people I've gotten into firearms by breaking out these old guns, and they're like, oh, I recognize that because of some video game XYZ somewhere. And I'm like, oh, really? You want to shoot it? They're like, oh, absolutely, I do. And the next thing we know, we got ourselves an ally in the gun community. And that is the best way to grow allies in the gun community. Like, I actually go to public ranges fairly often, and while I'm there, I'll have a lot of people come by, and they're like, oh, what are you shooting? Because everyone who goes out to public ranges, they all go out and they shoot their ARs or shotguns. Like, ARs, shotguns, and 9mm handguns are by far a huge portion of what people go out to shoot. So whenever I show up with an old Yugoslavian Mauser, or whenever I show up with a Mosin Nagant, or whenever I show up with like some unusual thing, like this French Moss 49, or is it 49? Yeah, 4956. People notice, and they're like, hey, that's cool. I recognize that from this particular game, or that particular movie, or this particular instance. And I'm like, oh yeah, they exist in real life too. It's not just a video game thing. How about I walk you through how this bad boy works, and I show you how to shoot it, and actually let you sense some lead down range. And man, I've gotten a lot of people into guns because of exactly that. As a matter of fact, just thinking, I could probably think of like a dozen people who went out and got themselves a firearm just because I showed them some of these old guns that they recognize. That's one of the reasons why I like using guns that show up so popularly in video game culture. Like the Mauser, the Mosin, and the Enfield seem to be the most popular ones. Every now and then I'll get somebody who recognizes the Carcano. The M1 Grand, that's one that I can break out and everybody knows what that is, whether they're in the gun community or not. Bottom line, these guys are not our enemies. Stop treating them like they're our enemies. We definitely need to become more unified as a gun community. We are not fighting each other. We are fighting the people that are trying to take our rights away. So we need to come together and stop trying to divide each other. So that's kind of the arguing point that I'm trying to make here, I guess. There's a really, really, really good opportunity to get a whole lot of people involved in the gun community, because the video game community that's based around these guns is just so massive. Like, we could really, really get ourselves a big bump in the increase of influence, I guess is the word I'm trying to find here. A big bump in the increase of influence if we stop deciding that just because someone likes video games that they don't deserve to be involved in the gun culture. So, thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. Encourage everybody to be in the gun culture, no matter what it is that they like. I'll see you guys in the next video. I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garrett. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.